is Terry Bradshaw, quarterback, Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's 7:15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
This is baseball, Major League Baseball. And this is
ABC's Monday Night Baseball, live from Fenway Park in Boston, Massachusetts.
Looking. He's under the gun. He's flat. He throws.
It is February 3rd, 2025, and on this day 50 years ago, the super sub, John Laskowski of the Indiana Hoosiers, was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Hi again, everybody. Mark Hoffman and Bill Mahoney once again joining me, Scott Johnston, for the latest Past Our Prime podcast. Going to talk a little college hoops and Bobby Knight and Hoosiers hoops with the cover man, John Laskowski, what he's been up to for the last half century. That and a whole lot more. But with us talking Hoosiers, I'm going to get right to it. Mark and Bill, both movie guys. Hoosiers, about as good as it gets for a sports movie. Gene Hackman, the picket fence, Jimmy Chitwood looking up and saying, "I'll make it." Great stuff. So I'm going to ask you guys, what is your favorite sports movie of all time?
Favorite all-time sports movie? Wow, that is a really good one. I mean, Pride of the Yankees was good just because that Babe Ruth playing Babe Ruth. That's impressive. Brian's song. I mean, didn't matter what time, when you ever see that movie, you always want to cry when James Caan dies and they play that music. But Brian's song for a made-for-TV movie, ABC, is still has a pretty powerful punch even today.
Does.
Oh,
Bill, you got one?
I'm a simpleton, man. I like Major League.
Okay.
I just, and I like Bad News Bears, the first one.
And do you think she ever will get an expansion team in Miami? You think that'll ever work?
My favorite, hands down, is Rocky.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, fair. Yeah.
I can watch Rocky and pretty much the first three of those.
Yep.
Anytime. So
Yeah, Mr. T was just classic.
Oh yeah, pity the
It's
fool.
classic. Yeah.
Mark, we need to generate a little bit of revenue, so Bill and I are going to go get something to eat. Why don't you do an ad for us?
Oh, sure. Hey, let's do something real health conscious. How about a cigarette ad? That sounds great. There's Salem, nice with it's very green cover, for the cigarette. That sounds really healthy, outdoorsy. And they got a picture of a guy and it says refresh yourself. And the guy's like outdoors, like on a lake, and he's got no shirt on, just his jeans, which are soaking wet. And he's soaking and he's got a little hat on, and he's got the cigarette in his mouth. But to me, it's like, if that's not the picture of health, they hire some actor who's like a little chunky, he's I don't know if I want to call him fat, but just a little chunky. And he's trying to suck his stomach in as best he can. And it's just not working. It's like those ads, the before and after ads, and all they do is they have the guy hold his stomach in and stand up straight for the after picture, and the before picture, let your stomach out and slump a little. There's no magic, pill he needs to take or whatever. And that's what they're doing here. The guy is just trying as desperate as he can to suck everything in.
One thing I find funny about these old cigarette ads is they really do try to make it sound like the healthy, outdoorsy people lifestyles are the ones who are smoking cigarettes.
Oh yeah.
And now you can look at people that are like, in their 60s and look like they're 80, and it's like, oh, there's someone who smoked.
Yep.
Right. Exactly.
I always like it that it appears that a lot of women pick their men based on the cigarettes they smoked back then.
Yeah.
Right. Tarrington, you're my boy.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
If you're smoking Virginia Slims and you're a guy,
exactly. There's something going on there.
This issue starts with movie talk, and we've talked about this one before, The Towering Inferno, with an unbelievable cast, which included football superstar O.J. Simpson. Mark, what was this classic about?
It's about a building and a fire breaks out and no one can get out. They're stuck on the tower. They're at the very top of the tower and there's fire below them. And who's going to survive and who isn't. It's basically the Poseidon adventure, but not on a boat. And yeah, you got Paul Newman and Steve McQueen and OJ. I think OJ plays fireman in the movie, you know.
Yep.
And it's yeah,
OJ plays like the head of security, I think, or something like
Yeah,
maybe it
yeah.
is.
Yeah, I think
But
McQueen was the fire guy, wasn't he?
but what's so fascinating to me is you had Earthquake, the movie, you had all these disaster movies in the 70s.
that. Right,
And
airplane or
it's
airport.
Irwin Allen.
Earthquake was one of
Basically,
my favorites.
yeah, Irwin Allen is just basically, okay, how can I set a new disaster? Where can I set this at? You know, how can I change it? You know, I can do it on a boat. I can do it on a tower. You know, I can just do all of LA, you know, but, you know, how am I going to do my next disaster film?
We had Joe DeLamalure on, who was blocking for OJ Simpson back in the day, and he told us about how OJ had the whole team to watch the premiere of this. And
Yeah.
you know, I thought, and so did they, that you know OJ handled himself pretty well.
You did. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a little dated if you look back on it now, but back in 74, it was the highest grossing film. It also won 3 Academy Awards, so it did something back in the day. I liked it.
Let's talk scorecard, shall we? Nerve they've got. Bill?
You know, there we go, just about a kid. He got a lot of guts here. He went up to Gordie Howe. He wanted an autograph, so he waited outside the Houston Aeros dressing room the team Gordie Howe was playing for, and told Gordie, "Sign my stick." Gordie Howe seemed a little shaken, but said, "Hey, okay, say please." The kid said, "Please, you know, put it all together." Or Shirk said, the boy said, "Gordie, would you please sign my damn stick?"
Believe that?
Another 17-year-old kid said, "Please send me 3 decals. Also, 3 bumper stickers, a schedule, team and individual photos, ticket order forms, stadium diagram, and photos, a list of things to buy, any past and present programs, yearbooks, media books, press guides, rosters, old publications, autographs, scorecards, photos, posters, pennant patches, badges, magnets, etc. And anything also on Nate Archibald. Thank you." He got 1 decal. Man, that's a
More
lot of
than he
guys.
deserved.
But man, just to go to a guy like Gordie Howe and say, "Sign this thing."
Yeah. As it says, the beginning is call it chutzpah. I mean,
Yeah.
no please. And then the other guy sending just a litany of things.
That's right. All that stuff.
Maybe, you know, could I please get 3 bumper stickers, you know?
Yes, that's what you normally do.
Yeah. Crazy. Crazy. They said it. Mark?
Dale Bandy, who's the Ohio University's new basketball coach. And they were asked the difference between assistant coaches and head coaches. And then, because I guess he had been an assistant coach obviously before, and he said, "I never realized there was such a difference between making a suggestion and making a decision." And that's the key. When you're assistant or you're an offensive coordinator in the NFL or a defensive coordinator or a linebackers coach, and maybe the coordinator isn't a good example, but a linebackers coach or a running backs coach, or, you know, you can make a suggestion to the coordinator, to the coach. I think this would be a good thing to run, but he's not obligated and you're not on the line for it. When you're a coach and you make a decision, that sticks. And if it doesn't work, it's your ass on the line, basically.
Yep.
So there's a huge difference.
No question. Kansas City Scouts coach. Kansas City Scouts were what, a WHA team, Bill?
No, they were in it.
Yeah.
Oh, they're
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were exactly. They were. Yeah, they were. Yeah.
wow. Matt
Who did they become, though?
says, asked if he has nightmares about his expansion team, quote, "You got to sleep before you have nightmares."
So
So
true.
I'm going to start with a sad story titled "Sad End of an Empire" about a guy named Rex Ellsworth. He did things differently. And when he used his life savings to buy a horse named Khalid, and that horse had a son named Swaps that won the 1955 Kentucky Derby ridden by Willie Shoemaker, he then went on to be on the cover of SI in 1963 as the leading breeder in the country. People started to take notice. What they didn't notice was that he was an abusive owner, Billy.
Yeah, they went to his farm and he had malnourished or dead horses on his Chino Ranch right down the street from us.
Ugh.
How do
And
you
there
do
are
that
pictures
to
in
an
the
animal, man?
magazine. There are these pictures in the magazine that are so heartbreaking to look at. And I'm glad that people can't see these pictures because, I mean, it just breaks my heart.
Yeah, he also was a guy that a couple people went to visit his farm, and one of the horses didn't do what he wanted, so he walked up and just a hard right hand punch to the middle of the horse's face, and then
Yeah,
said
so
to the people and said, "That'll teach the horse to mind its manners."
right, so that's in 1957 when that happens. That's 17 years before uh,
Yeah.
this horrible incident where he basically was starving horses to death, basically because they were of no use to him anymore.
Ugh.
And then, he's still like I said, he's on the cover of SI in 63. So this guy was abusing horses for a long, long time. And yeah, they go there. 5 of them lay dead on the floor. 4 more had to
Oh.
be put down. It ends his horse racing career. But Mark, no jail time for this guy.
Yeah, apparently, yeah. It was just I think there were lawsuits were filed, but I don't think he ever spent a day in jail. And he lived, I think, a fairly long life. And you wonder at the beginning, when he was so successful, was he treating them with kid gloves? Because they showed these older pictures and he's smiling, he's got the horse there. You never know what's behind a person's smile and what they do when the cameras aren't on them and stuff.
Yeah, this was not good. On a happier note, our cover story and Bobby Knight's Indiana Hoosiers by Curry Kirkpatrick, shining in the shadow of night, Knight. Indiana is 18-0, number 1 in the land. But besides their volatile coach, nobody knows who they are. How good have things been in 18 games this far? Coach Knight has 1 technical foul.
Yeah.
Against Purdue, their closest competition in the Big Ten, starting forward Steve Green was out with the flu, so John Laskowski, the cover man of this issue, came off the bench and was thrust into the starting lineup. He scored 13 points in the first half as Indiana rolled by 33 over the Boilermakers. This is a great, great Indiana team.
And the following year they'll win the national championship, and Knight's got this incredible team, and they probably could have won it this year had they not had a certain injury to one of their key players. But I mean, this was the year where UCLA gets its last hurrah, and they're very fortunate that Indiana didn't make it to the Final Four that year, or maybe Wooden goes out not having that 10th championship.
It hurt when Scott May broke his arm, so that may have stopped them getting to the point where they could face UCLA.
Right, because the team they lost to, Kentucky, and the only loss
That's
that
right.
entire year, Kentucky, because May was hurt, and
Yep.
Kentucky ended up playing UCLA in the finals that year. But to me, what's amazing, there's this picture of Bobby Knight, and he's talking to an official. And we all have our images of Bobby Knight, but this one few people have him with completely dark hair.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, that's
weird to
right.
look at. It's like, wait, who's that guy? Oh, that is Knight.
And as Curry Kirkpatrick told us last week, Bobby Knight, not a fan of this article.
Not surprising.
Yeah, I don't know if there was too many articles he liked, but he certainly didn't like this one. We are playing against our potential, not our opponents, says Laskowski. There are no easy teams. We respect everybody.
Laskowski was known as the super sub, the 6th man on that 1975 team, a 6'6" senior out of South Bend, Indiana, a key player for a team that went 31-1 on the year. And John joins us now to talk about that great time in Hoosier land. And first of all, John, did the guys give you a little bit of the business for being the one that was on the cover of Sports Illustrated back then? Have you gotten over it yet?
No, I haven't gotten over it yet. It's a surprise of a lifetime for any athlete. You see so many years before you, all these famous people, and all of a sudden you're on there. It's like, this can't be happening, but it absolutely did. The players took it very well, but I had a coach that did not take it very well. The story is one of the first stories. It was my 3rd year on the team, 4th year for Coach Knight, and it was the first time that he'd made some national press with an interview. Curry Kirkpatrick from Sports Illustrated came to town and did the story about the new #1 team. North Carolina State was the defending national champ, and they'd lost a game in late January, and we were undefeated, so we moved up to #1. So he comes to the school, and he's at practice, and I think Coach is excited, to have a story featuring his Hoosiers on Sports Illustrated. And he took us out to dinner, and and we each talked to him a little bit. And then Coach read the article, and he did not like the article one bit. Okay, just not what he had imagined it would be. And so we're at practice the next day. And of course, I'd been to breakfast at the frat house, and one of the guys has the magazine already and lifts it up. He said, "Have you seen this?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, that's me." And so I had a half a day to prepare for this practice. And we go to practice, and coach is not happy. Okay, we got a game coming up, and I'm playing a regular practice as far as I can tell, and all of a sudden he stops it. "Okay, Laskowski, that's enough. I've been watching this all practice, and you're just you get your picture on the cover of that damn magazine, and you don't think you have to run around and play anything here." He said, "I'm not going to have him. Now get going." Now, whether or not that really what he saw, to me, it was a message to the whole team. Guys, don't worry about that. We got a game to play. That's exactly his coaching method was. We got a game to play. Don't look at your accolades till the season's over. Let's keep going. And that's the point that got across. So the guys didn't say anything, but old Coach and I did. He hammered me on it.
And so you didn't know until you saw it that you were on the cover?
No, we knew he was in town. We knew he talked to a bunch of the guys. We just weren't prepared for what was going to happen. I think the interesting point was, and I use this in talks that I still give today, is that when you see somebody and they do something and you say, "Wow, I want to be able to do that." Okay. Well, it's already been done. That guy already did it. You know, Michael Jordan dunked the ball from the free throw line. But once it's been done, it's not a big deal anymore. Okay. And so I think with me, it was, if you're going to be a college basketball player in the 70s, you need to be a starter, because the 5 guys who start are the best players. And if you're on the bench, that means you're not going to have to be a starter, and so you're not very good. And we still had a freshman team my freshman year, and so we had an 8-game freshman schedule. And then when I became a sophomore, I was on the varsity, okay, just like the freshmen. So it was actually 2 classes going in at the same time, the freshman class and the sophomore class now being eligible. And coach is going through the lineup with all these new guys. And the very first game, he played Harvard. And about 7 or 8 minutes go by, and he puts me in the game. I'm the first sub in. And I could play a guard or forward. You know, I couldn't play center, but I could play all the other positions. And that just continued. I scored about 15 points that game, and it continued the whole year long. And I was always the first guy off the bench. And I'd play as many minutes as all the other guys, 26, 27 minutes a game. And so it didn't really matter who started in my mind. It was actually an advantage for me because I knew I didn't have the pressure of trying to start the game. But I'm watching what's going on for 6, 7, 8 minutes. Who am I going to guard? Who's in foul trouble for us? Who's not playing good? You can almost anticipate who I'd be going in for. And sure enough, Laz, get in there. Remember, we had those candy striped pants, still do today.
Oh, yeah.
And so I had my candy striped pants on. And the last thing I wanted to have happen was coach is calling you in the game, and you can't get the darn pants off, okay? Well, he'd say, well, forget it. I'm going to the next guy, all right? So we do our warm-ups. They're introducing the starting lineup. I take my pants off, okay? And I lay my pants on top of my legs for the first 6 or 7 minutes. And he says, Laskowski, get in the game. I just whip them. They're not connected anymore. I've already taken them off. But to the crowd, it looks like I still have them on, okay? So that was a trick I used for 3 years. He never caught me with my pants on too long because I never had them on.
You know, you answered my question kind of about coming off the bench, but 4 starters on your team that year, Scott May, Steve Green, Kent Benson, and Quinn Buckner, were named to the 5-man all Big Ten team. You guys were loaded, weren't you?
We were loaded, and it was great to be with those guys. The most interesting part about that season, I think, was before the season started, we're practicing, and we had a guy named Bobby Wilkerson. He's the one guy that started that you didn't mention. He was a guard, 6'7". He was a great ball handler, great defender, and he jumped center for our team.
Wow.
Okay, Benson's like 6'11", and Wilkerson jumps because he can jump higher and faster than Benson can. And so we haven't started our first game yet. And Knight calls me over after practice, He's going to have a little talk with me, which is rare. He never has one-on-ones a lot. He does it through the whole team, like I explained the other incident. And he goes, hey, he said, I want to thank you for being our sub for those 2 years. You've done a great job. He said, I played at Ohio State on a national champion team, and I never got to start. And that was always one of my goals. And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, well, you had Jerry Lucas and John Havlicek and Siegfried. I said, Coach, you weren't good enough to be a starter in those days. But I let that go. I didn't mention that to him. Okay? And so I'm thinking, okay, well, he said, if you want to be a starter, he said, you tell me. And I'm going to put you and Buckner in the starting lineup at the guard. And I'm thinking, man, this is a shot. This is a surprise. You're asking my opinion if I want to start. And so I quickly thought, I got a pretty good gig here. I got my warm-ups ready. I'm 7-8 minutes in the game. I got this thing down pat. Why am I going to risk being a starter? I said, no, Coach, I think I got to keep on doing it. I said, Wilkerson's really come along well. I said, just start Wilkerson. And if he's having a tough game, I can come in for him. But if it's somebody else come in for them, doesn't matter, He goes, okay, I just want to see what you thought about it. And sure enough, he starts Wilkerson. And now these opposing guards are coming down the court, and there's Quinn Buckner and Bob Wilkerson at half court waiting to take them on. And you can see the fear in their eyes. These two guys, how am I going to deal with these two guys, And it really did well. I think Bobby appreciated it, and he got to be a starter. And, of course, you saw how great a team we had. And I got to do my same old job, which I knew exactly how to do.
If May doesn't get hurt, you guys are probably not Kentucky playing UCLA in the finals that year. Do you think that would have started the championship run?
Yes, it absolutely would have, because in the late 60s, mid-60s, late 60s, early 70s, UCLA was winning every tournament. And I'm an elementary school kid. I'm a junior high kid. I'm a high school kid. And every year UCLA's winning. And nobody beats UCLA. And that's what we grew up with. And so in 73, we go to the Final Four. My sophomore year, my first year playing, we played UCLA. And there's Johnny Wooden and there's Bill Walt and all the guys. It's like, oh, my gosh, do we really belong here? And they beat us by 11. But we at least got to experience it. So now 2 years later, we're in the same position. And we play Kentucky in December at Assembly Hall, and we beat them by 24 points. Okay? We are a better team in December than Kentucky is with the guys we have. Absolutely killed them. And then we get to the tournament, and Scott gets hurt in the Purdue game. And then we go 7 straight games after he gets hurt, and we win. We win all 7. In fact, Coach puts me in the starting lineup to replace Scott and puts me at forward, and then we did win 7 games, and we lose to Kentucky by 2. So absolutely, if Scott May was healthy and in the game, there's no way we would have lost that game to Kentucky. What's interesting would have been to play UCLA in the final game, because that's the way it prepared out. They beat Kentucky for the championship. Johnny Wooden had announced the beginning of the year he was retiring, so we knew it was his last year. And it was the coming of age of Bobby Knight. And if Knight would have beat Wooden, it really would have been the change of the guard. But maybe it just played out the way it should have, where Wooden was such a legend, retired, and winning the last championship 10 out of 12 years. And then Knight takes the next one and starts his. So it's interesting how things play out. Sometimes good, sometimes bad.
Okay, because to me, like, what was interesting is then that following year, so you've graduated, but I'm sure you were following the program. The following year, you opened the season against UCLA, and then Gene Bartow was taken out over as head coach for UCLA, and you beat them decisively in that first game. And then at the very end of the year, you meet again in the Final Four, and again, you beat them decisively. So that following year, the changing of the guard takes place.
Exactly, and so it would have been a victory for us, I think, in '75, and then Knight would have won 2 in a row. But maybe it did play out the way it was supposed to. I did follow the team. I was a rookie at the Chicago Bulls that year, and would watch when I could. And they had a great year. They actually had closer games than we did. Our average winning margin in '75 was, I think, 24 points a game. And it wasn't that high in '76. They had a couple close games as well, but they had a determination of we screwed up the year before, albeit if somebody broke his arm, but still, how could we have still won it? And they were not going to let that happen again. Coach had made a talk in the locker room after the Kentucky game. It was in Dayton, Ohio, and he said, boys, you had a great year. We're all disappointed. Let's not let this happen next year to us. Let's start right now, and for you guys coming back, we're going to win this thing next year. And sure enough, and a year later, that's right where they were.
But John, I want to ask, we've all heard the Knight stories. We've heard the fun ones, the tough ones. What was he like to play for? What was he like on a day-to-day basis with you guys?
Well, it was an interesting time. I think back to 1975. So 50 years before that was 1925. Okay. The jump shot hadn't been invented. Nobody knew how to dunk. I mean, it was a completely different game. And so fast forward now to 2025, I was that player 50 years ago. I mean, the game's nowhere near what it was now either. Okay. There are player interviews. There are podcasts. There's internet. You get to know all you can about these players. 50 years ago, coach's deal was you guys never talk to the press. You never talk to the referees. I'm going to talk to the press. I'm going to talk to the referees. You guys just play ball. And that's all we did. We just played ball. And he did all the rest, okay? So it was about his coaching style of we're all in this thing together. We're a team. And we're going to win and lose as a team. And he never got to points of, I want you to do this interview and here's what I want you to say or any of that stuff, because we just didn't do it. We're out to win the next game. He made every team look like they were a great team. In those days, Northwestern was not very good. And we beat them every day, 30, 35 points. And every 3-4 days prep before that game, he made them sound like they were the best team in the league. And he'd say, no, this guy can do this, and this guy can do this. We got to stop this guy from doing this. And each practice was played out exactly how he wanted. And each game preparation was, let's take away the top score or the thing they want to do the most. Let's take that away from them. Let's see if the second or third or fourth leading scorer can win the game. Here's how we're going to take away the first score. And most teams, I think, weren't preparing that way for their opponent. And we were. And so we figured out how to stop that guy. And the number 2 and number 3 guy, they're good, but they've never been the number 1 guy. And so they're not used to that. And sure enough, it worked well for us. So he was very demanding. Practice was hard. Practice was hard in the games. Games were a day off. Because practice was 2.5 hours. And it was do this drill, do that drill, do that drill. Here's what we're going to have to work on. Here's what you need to do better. And it was exhausting after that practice. Whereas the games, I mean, you're playing 26 minutes, you're playing hard, and we're winning, and the crowd's there. That gives you enthusiasm. And he never had a real chance to get unhappy. I mean, we're undefeated. I mean, what are you going to say? You guys should have won by 30, not 26. We just got kind of on a roll, but we never got to that point where he was nervous about keeping winning. I heard later on from one of the assistant coaches, Michigan had a good team in those years, as you know. And we always battled them tough in Ann Arbor, but we'd never beaten them there. And we went up there, and he told this was early January, so before we were number 1, he said, if we can beat Michigan on the road, I think we can be undefeated. And this assistant coach told me this years later. Of course, he wouldn't let the team know that. But he was planning on an undefeated season in early January. And we beat Michigan up there and, of course, ran the table the rest of the way. In fact, an interesting fact about those 2 years is the Big Ten record for most consecutive Big Ten wins is 37. And that's the 75 team, 76 team, 18-0, and I think they won the first game the next year, okay? Second place is 20, and that's the 1960 Bob Knight Ohio State team with Lucas Havlicek, Siegfried, those guys. And so since 1975, nobody's got to 20, let alone 37,
right?
Okay? And now with transfer portal and all that stuff, it's one of those that'll never be beaten because the team's changed so much and the competition is so good and the coaches are so good and winning on the road is so hard now. I don't see that anybody ever come close to that.
We're talking with 1999 Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame inductee John Laskowski, the super sub, as he was known for those great Hoosier teams of the mid-'70s. And, John, I remember being in the media room, I want to say it was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, when Coach Knight brought out the whip. I think it was in 93. I've never seen a group of media people more intimidated than in those 5, 10, 15 minutes. Was he intimidating to play for as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. He's a big guy, 6'5". He played forward. And in 1960, that was a big guy. And so he has a physical presence about him and is very demanding about being on time, about following instructions. He didn't have a whistle in practice. He just said, hold on. Or he'd say, keep him from going to his right or whatever. Never had to have a whistle. It was, you're going to be in the game and I'm going to yell something and I'm going to whistle. You got to be able to hear me, what I need you to do. And so that was just the command that he had of being there. You know, he'd come into a room and all of a sudden it was, all right, we got our coach here. Here we go. My mom was scared to death of him. And we lived in South Bend. She did. Of course, we'd play at Notre Dame. It was easy for her to go to the game. So my senior year, we go to the game and we win. And I'm in the hallway talking to my mom. And coach comes out and he says, Mrs. Ladd, it sure is good to see you. And she could barely, talk. But just the presence of him being there was so daunting that you read about him in the paper and you see him in person. And he's always got a purpose on where he wants to go. And I said, Mom, relax. He does like you, okay? I want to get back real quick to the point I made about the being different. I don't think I finished that thought. And people were trying to do things that other people do. If you do things that are different, that's what makes you stand out, okay? So when Michael Jordan dunked that ball from the free throw line, that was different, okay? And so when you come off the bench and you play as many minutes and you score as many points as the starters, that's different. And I think Curry saw that. Curry Patrick saw that. And that's why I got on the cover. Because we had two great guards. We had two great forwards. We had a great center. Well, every number one team in the country has that. Okay. He's seen it, been there, done that before. No big deal. Who's this guy that comes off the bench? I haven't seen that before. And I think it caught his attention so much that he goes to his editor and says, let's put this guy in the cover. Because nobody else has one of these guys. They've all got other good players, but this is very unique. And that's what I got. So that's what I talk about. Be different with the talents and abilities God gave you. Don't be the same as somebody else. And that played off well. And 50 years later here, I'm still on the cover of Sports Illustrated.
So how does a South Bend kid then go to Indiana? I mean, Notre Dame had, a good program, players like Austin Carr, and Knight was just starting. I mean, he wasn't quite the legend that he later became. So what was the decision for you to go to Indiana and say not to Notre Dame?
Absolutely. You are exactly right. You grew up in South Bend. You are a Notre Dame football fan. Eric Parstein was the football coach, and man, Notre Dame was just the best. But none of the local kids ever did good at Notre Dame. But you always wanted to say, am I good enough to go to Notre Dame? And so we played the sectional and the holiday tournament, the high schools in South Bend at Notre Dame at the new Convocation Center. And man, what a treat that was, And so the Notre Dame coaches would get to watch us. They'd just come into the game, from their office and they'd watch. So my high school coach, he calls me out of class in January. He says, come here, I want to talk to you. And so I go to his office and he goes, man, you're having a great year. He said, we're going to get you a scholarship. He says, as a matter of fact, he said, I just heard from Notre Dame. And Johnny D, the coach, has offered you a scholarship, paid for everything if you want to go to Notre Dame. I went, oh my gosh, coach, that's the most amazing news ever. He goes, I know. He says, just don't tell anybody. He said, the season's over. If you want to go to Notre Dame, we'll get the paperwork worked out and you're going to go to school. And I'm thinking, man, this is great. So they invite me to the banquet at Notre Dame. There were banquets back 50 years ago. That's how the team ended their season, have a banquet. And, of course, only UCLA would be having a happy banquet because they won, but everybody else still had a banquet. So I go to the banquet, and Austin Carr is a senior at Notre Dame, and they introduce him and a farewell to the great Austin Carr. And they introduced me as a prize recruit, coming to Notre Dame. And I'm just so excited. The next day, they fired Johnny D. They fired the coach, okay, because that's his last job. This is the banquet, okay? And they hired Digger Phelps. and Digger invites me out for a visit, and I stay at the Morris Inn. Took 10 minutes to get there. I stayed overnight, and John Shoemate was there. Shoemate was a big 6'8" mountain of a man, and Dwight Clay and Gary Brokaw were the two guards. He wanted to come in there, and we're playing 2-on-2. Well, I'm guarding Shoemate. I mean, there's no way. This guy's an animal. And I'm sure they went back to Digger and said, why are we recruiting this kid? I mean, he's not very good. So anyway, Moose Krause, the athletic director, calls my school, and he gets my coach. He says, I'm sorry, we've had a coaching change, and we're not going to be able to honor that scholarship of your kid going to Notre Dame.
Wow.
And I went, oh no! And he said, don't worry, we'll get you somewhere. You can go to Western Michigan or DePaul or Indiana State. And he said, there's this new coach at Indiana, and he likes to get Midwest kids, Indiana, Ohio, Illinois kids. We might be able to get a visit with him. And so he does. We had it set up, and the night was after Pete Trigovich, East Chicago, Washington, undefeated state champ. He goes to see Trigovich. He says, kid, I know you don't know me, but I'm going to create a dynasty at Indiana. And Trigovich says, dynasty? I'm going to go to UCLA. They already have one. And he does. He goes to UCLA, and he wins 2 more championships. And then he talked to a kid in Greenwood, Indiana, Jerry Nichols, who's the same town that the Van Arsdale twins are from. Played in the mid-'60s. Coach played against him a little bit, and he knew him, and he took them to help recruit him. And the kid said, no, I don't go to Indiana. I want to go to Purdue. He went to Purdue, our arch rival. So little unbeknownst to me, I was the third choice for my position.
Oh, God.
Because if either Trigovich or Nichols would have said yes, there goes my scholarship. I saw Trigovich about 5 years ago. I said, Pete, let's go out for dinner. I'm buying you a steak. And I tell him that story. He goes, yeah, that's what happened. I said, here's steaks on me, buddy, because nobody'd ever heard of me if you just said yes. And so it was really just the grace of God that I got to go to Indiana. I signed my letter of intent June 10th. Orientation was July 17th, and class started in August. And so I was a late bloomer, late comer, and now these kids are getting seen in 8th and 9th grade, and they're offered as sophomores and juniors, and man, it's just a crazy change. But Notre Dame didn't turn out, but Indiana's been beautiful to me.
Well, it's odd to be, obviously it worked out, but it had to be devastating to you to not to be able to get into Notre Dame or them doing what they did to you.
It was. At the time, you probably don't take it as seriously because you think, well, there's other opportunities. Now, in all the games we played, fellas, who do you think I played the hardest against?
Yeah.
John Shoemate.
Notre Dame. Of course. I'll show you guys. You don't think I can play here? And, it came down to my sophomore year. I stole the ball with about 30 seconds to go, dribbled in, made a shot. And then I get fouled late in the game, less than 5 seconds to go. And I make the first shot, tie the game. I miss the next one, but it's rebounded by Steve Downing. Our center, he puts it back in. Notre Dame throws a half-court pass for our last shot. I steal the ball. Game ends. We beat Notre Dame. So, man, that was a happy moment because I knew I'd made the right choice.
December 7th, 1974, another day that will live in infamy. You already mentioned it. Indiana beat Kentucky that day, 98-74. And at one point, Knight goes over towards the Kentucky bench to argue with an official. And you tell us what happened from that point on. Do you remember, John?
Well, that's probably let Coach handle stuff, because all we had to do was play ball. But he and Joe B. Hall were buddies, unbeknownst to most people. He got along with most coaches, although he didn't act like it in the heat of the battle. And of course, Hall comes over to find out what Knight's talking about. And I don't think Coach liked that very much, but he slaps him on the back of the head. And it wasn't one of those, I hate your guts and I hope you never win another game. I'm not sure what it would have been, but boy, it was taken as how in the world would a coach do that to another coach? And of course, Kentucky took it very, very harsh. It came out in the press conference. It was quite a talk for a long time. So coach has never talked about his side of that story. He just kind of lets it go. But yes, it did create quite a stir. I don't know if that would have come up in their pregame meetings the next time when we played them, when they beat us, that, hey, don't let a guy get away with this kind of stuff. But that's who he was. He was he was young. When I was recruited, I was 17. He was 30. He's only 13 years older than I was. He acted so much mature than that. And he was just a great leader in that you wanted to follow him, and you knew if you did what he said, it would play out well. And all you had to concentrate was on those things. And don't try to do something in the game that you haven't shown me you can do in practice. What are you doing? Just because it's a game, you think you're going to make 15-foot hook shots? No, you're not. Just keep doing what you showed me in the game, and we're going to be fine. And that was a great emphasis point to us. And so the key was you had to show him in practice what you could do. And he said, if you could do it in practice, we can do it in the game. What's the difference, He called Steve Green, was in my class, great forward, played in the NBA as well and ABA. And we had an inter-squad game in Fort Wayne. It was kind of a ritual thing. We take a bus up there. We get tired of beating up each other, but we go up there, and now there's a crowd, and we're playing an inter-squad game. And we come back, and of course they filmed it, so they could go back and review the film. And the next day, I get a call, like practice is going to be at 3 o'clock. Say, I want you in here at 12:30. You and Green, get in here. Come into the office. I want to show you this film from last night. I'm thinking, what the heck is this? And he and I are sitting there, and one of the assistant coaches is in there. And he's got that reel-to-reel, the old 8mm film, and he's going forward, going backwards. He's going, Green. Is that a defensive stance? How come you can't get down a defensive stance? And he goes, Laskowski, how come you can't run down is that the fastest you can run down the court? What are you? How come you're not running fast? It's like, what the heck? Where's the rest of the guys? How come you're not yelling at them? Why are you yelling at us too? And it got out of the meeting, kind of looked at each other, and we kind of figured it out. Like, he'd already had Steve Downing and John Ritter. Buckner was the freshman. He was going to start. Jim Cruz. He needed a couple more guys to make this team right, to get the picture together. And he figured it's got to be Green and Laskowski. Those two guys will go in there, give them a film session, rip them a new one, and tell them to get going. And so I'm thinking, okay, we're the ones he's picked. We better do it. And Green ended up being a great starter. I came off the bench, and we go to the Final Four, and UCLA beats us. So there were wild methods that he used to say, I believe in you. He didn't say it to your face. I believe in you, and I need you. You need to be a great player for me. It was other ways to do that said the same message that, yep, I got this figured out, Coach. You recruited very smart players, and we had to understand what was going on. And that's how I think we beat a lot of teams, just kind of outsmarted. He outcoached them, and we played harder. We made fewer mistakes, and that was the key to Indian basketball in the 70s.
John, you can tell just when talking to you how much you loved and respected Coach Knight. Do you remember your last conversation with him before he passed, and how devastating was it to you when he died?
Yeah, he'd moved back to Bloomington, which he really enjoyed doing. I happen to have a restaurant here I'm sitting outside the restaurant right now. It's a Culver's restaurant, very popular in the Midwest and Southeast. We're only in 26 states, but it's a great little franchise concept. And he would come here once or twice a week in his last few years. And Karen, his wife, would bring him. He'd sit in the booth, and he'd talk to little old ladies, and he'd sign pictures, and the kids. He loved talking to kids, and it was just the gentler side of him that we didn't get to see much when we played for him. I think he respected the fact that he knew it was tough. He knew a lot of guys couldn't get through it, and a lot of guys transferred. But if you got through his 4 years, he respected that, and he treated you as a friend for life. And just to see, Karen would call and say, hey, we're going to come. I'd meet him at the door, and I'd open the door for him. He'd come in, Coach, third booth on the left. That's your seat. Yeah, good to see you. And I don't remember the exact last thing I would say to him, but it was that kinder side that I got to see at the end, as opposed to the side 50 years before when he was yelling and screaming and knowing it was for your good, which you didn't believe. I didn't believe at the time, but knowing it made me work harder and play smarter and play to your potential was a big thing with him. And you can be better than you are, and it can push you farther. One of the greatest things he said, I'm running down the floor, and he said, Laz, keep running. You pass out before you die. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, he'll revive me. That's
What a
great to know.
motivator there.
He's
Yeah,
looking out for your
never did
well-being.
Pass out, but I always tried to run fast because I knew he wouldn't kill me. All right, you got my back, coach. And those are the kind of things that you laugh at now. At the time, they're not funny, but the team hears that, and there were certain guys that he picked on more. Benson was one, Steve Green, myself. We took that criticism well. It was like, we know we're goofing up. It's going to make me work harder. Whereas some of the other guys, they could go into a shell if he got on him. But when he got on one guy, it affected the whole 12 guys because I don't want him yelling at me, so I better get going too. Let's now yell at one guy and 12 guys respond. All right? That was the method to his madness. Now, which guys can I really get on who aren't going to be affected as much and come to perform higher? And I was one of those guys. I know how he figures that out, but he figured out I was one of them. Man, I caught a lot of hell.
Do you remember your very first meeting with him, the first time you're one-on-one with Coach Knight?
There were several. He'd go to East Chicago and see Trigovich, and then it was about an hour drive to South Bend. He'd come see me. And he didn't tell me that, though, at the time. And so it was very serious. I got a picture here in the restaurant, and it's in this recruiting process. He's got a green sport jacket on and a green shirt and no tie. And I'm thinking, well, how come you're not wearing red?
Yeah.
You can't
Right.
red. But it was beside the point. He's sitting at my kitchen table, and he's talking about Indiana. He's talking about, here's what I want to do, and here's how I'm going to build this dynasty. We're going to play defense, okay? And then he had an idea of, I need a center, I need these kind of forwards, I need these kind of guards, and I was that guard forward type player. And so that was the Trigovich model, and that he was going to mold and make this team. Because in Army, he was restricted. There couldn't be guys over 6'6" in the Army, and so he never had huge guys. And he still wanted Army, and so he changed his coaching a little bit. But I think the presence that he had, and I asked my high school coach about it. What do you think of this guy? And he didn't know him well either yet, but he knew that he had played Ohio State. And at Army, he was very disciplined, and you're going to play defense. He said, you're going to play defense. That's going to be the key, because Indiana was known as the hurrying Hoosiers, and we'd score 100 points a game in the 50s and the 60s and 70s, early 70s, and we just outscored teams. And that stopped immediately when he got there. And it was, defense is going to win this game, boys. We're going to score enough points to win, but defense is it. So one of the things I remember in the restaurant here, he said, you never played defense for me. He said, that was my problem with you. You never played defense. I said, Coach, I think you're right. I was not a great defensive player, but you had a bunch of guys who could. Coach, my job was to score points because you can't beat them unless you outscore them. And he laughed. So he knew I had my limits, but he knew that when he needed a basket, I could get in the game and get that for him, and it worked out beautifully. I miss him to death, and I got drafted by the Bulls. And of course, I called and I said, Coach, what do I do now? I mean, I didn't expect to be drafted. I was already working a job with my business degree. He said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. He called the Bulls and he negotiated the contract, and he hired a local attorney here. And I had to pay him $400 to look over the contract. That was it. He took care of you forever after that. And of that 75 team, 8 guys played in the pros. And I made it 2 years, and then I got cut. They realized I had a lack of talent, and so I was available to be the color commentator for Indiana basketball. He calls me in the office and says, hey, I want you to be my color commentator on TV, statewide network. And I said, Coach, I can't do that. I'm real shy. I can't. They said, what do you have to do to be in TV? He said, well, when the red light comes on, start talking. Oh, yeah, I didn't know it was that easy. He said, now here's the problem with announcers. He said, they tell you what's going on. He said, they can see what's going on. He said, you got to educate the people of Indiana on this Indiana basketball. Why we're playing this defense and why you do the offense on this. Don't tell them what's going on. Tell them why we're doing it. He said, you know all that. I said, yeah, Coach, I understand all that. He said, well, the rest, don't worry about, okay? And 33 years, I was on TV around the state of Indiana doing Indiana basketball. And those were the prime years from 79 to 92. when Coach was there, and then I finished in 2012 when the Big Ten Network kind of took over and did away with the local hometown announcer and went to more of a ESPN model with 5 or 6 teams kind of doing the whole league. So he helped me with that. And then whenever you needed something in life, he was right there for you. And that was the respect he gave for those guys who were able to stick it out. And he never forgot who you were and what you did for him. And one of the best friends a guy could ever have.
I love to hear that side of him. I really do. John, on that 74,
he didn't show it.
No, we didn't get to see it.
Yeah.
I'm glad
He
that
didn't show it.
I'm glad
you didn't show. You didn't see it. You didn't see it. Yep.
On that 74-75 team is a first-year assistant coach with a funny name like Krzyzewski or Coach K. Was there any indication that he would become what he became?
No, and I swear it was Krzyzewski. I swear he introduced me as Krzyzewski with a K. And somehow by the time he left Indiana and went to Duke, it changed. Okay, maybe that was the more professional Polish pronunciation of it. So interesting story. Coach K. We didn't call him Coach K at the time. He was just Mike at the time, graduate student. He never traveled because graduate students had to stay home to study, but he'd come to practice, watch what we're doing. And of course, we're now the number 1 team in the country. And one of the great things Coach always tried to do was move his assistant coaches up to head coaching positions. And he's got a whole tree out there, guys, who were able to do that. And obviously Mike wanted to be that coach to move up. And so we're in a scrimmage part at the end of practice, divides the first and second team up. And fortunately, because I was the first man off the bench, I was able to be on the first team. And he goes, Coach Wedlick, you take the second team. Coach K, or Mike, you take the first team. They got 60 seconds in a timeout here. Get your team ready, and then we're gonna play. Okay? And Mike had been very quiet over the year, just watching what's going on, And now he gets in the huddle, and he's a young guy. He's in his 20s, okay, and he's got the number 1 team in the country right there. He's got 60 seconds to tell him what to do, and he looks around, and he's frozen. He doesn't know what to say. Of course, Knight looks over and sees nothing's going on, and it's, God damn it, Mike! I give you the number 1 team in the country. You got nothing to say to him? Now get in there and start coaching him. And that was the first time that he experienced being the coach of a number 1 team. And we laugh at it today because he learned what to say, didn't he, boys?
Sure did.
He had it several more times in his career. And so I followed his career at Duke a little bit. And, of course, didn't get to see him play much. But I had a young daughter and son. They were in their 8 or 9 or 10 years old. And I called him up and got tickets and went down to visit him at a Duke game. It was in December, so it wasn't an AC battle. Got tickets right behind the basket there. And I thought, maybe we'll sneak behind where they go to the locker room, get to talk to them. No, they got it all cardoned off, can't do it. I said, well, let's go down. We're staying overnight. We'll go down in the morning, we'll go see him, go in to see the secretary and say, hey, I came from Indiana, and Coach was the graduate assistant on my Indiana teams. I brought my 2 kids and sure would like to say hello and thank him for the tickets, And they said, well, he's not here. Come back in the afternoon. So I come back and tell my story again. They said, well, he's in a meeting now. They're getting ready to go to Hawaii, and he's got the coaching staff in there. He's in there. I said, he came all the way from Indiana, and it sure would be great if we could say hello. And she says, well, you can knock on the door and walk in, but, it's on your own, And my kids are going, you don't know this guy. You're making this up. So I opened the door. And we walk in, and he's got his back to us. In fact, because when he's having his back problem, he would stand up a lot. And there's the coaches, and they're planning this trip. He turns around, he sees me. And he goes, John, so good to see you. He said, come on. And he said, hey, guys, let's take a 10-minute break. I got to visit with this guy, and we'll continue our meeting here in a little while. And so I come in, the kids their mouths are dropping off, Hey, Coach, how are you? He said, man, I'll tell you what. He said, that year that I spent with you guys in Indiana, he said, that meant so much to me to see how Coach treated you guys, because his Army teams were good but not great, okay? But this Indiana team was the best team he'd ever seen. And he said, I learned so much that year. He said, and that's what's really taking place here is I've expanded that to enter my own things, but to follow what Coach did. And that's why this Duke program is so successful. And I said, Coach, I don't want to take any more of your time. Can we get a quick picture? And we're in like a conference room. He goes, absolutely. He said, but not here. I got a place in my office. And of course, there's trophies and pictures everywhere. He goes, this is a great place for a picture. And we get this picture, and the kids have it at the house. And I said, Coach, thanks for the ticket. It sure is good to see you. And just a memorable thing, how important that year was to him, that he made the right choice to be a college coach. Because, when you're a graduate assistant, you're kind of testing it out. Is this really what I want to do? And then, of course, the Army job came available. So Mike Krzyzewski is a college dropout. He didn't finish his second year at Indiana in the graduate program. He dropped out to take a job at Army, and Knight, of course, got him the job. And then I think he helped him at the Duke job too to get that job. And of course, the rest is history.
Yeah,
all-time winningest coach.
Worked out okay.
Yeah, we did work out okay. It seems a lot of things the coach did worked out. If you showed that trust and I can do what you asked me to do, Coach, you got a friend for life.
So we do a trivia question here. It's called segment called 50-50. I'm going to give you a 50% chance to get a trivia question right. It's like a true or false. That's it. Okay. So here's your question: true or false? Nick Nolte actually shadowed Bobby Knight and the Indiana basketball team during a season to prepare for the movie Blue Chips, which also starred Shaquille O'Neal with Nick Nolte. Is that true or false?
The answer would be false. It wasn't the whole season, but it was part of the year. I was in the movie. Coach had called and said, "Hey, I need you and your sidekick to be my play-by-play and color guy on the sidelines, okay? So it's a real game." And we spoke into a tape recorder. They never used any of the sound, but I was on the press row there, because he got me on the movie. So I got to go to 3 or 4 days of filming, and Nolte was there. I never got to meet him, but obviously it was a great movie, quite a character. Shaq was in the movie. They had a life-size poster of him, but he wasn't there that day when I was there. But it turned out to be a pretty good darn show. But Nolte, you could see why Knight and guys like him get along great. Mm-hmm. It's the guys that are really out there, different, as I mentioned before. Those are the guys that he really liked and got along with him so well. And Nolte would have been one of those guys.
See, now this is karma, because my original trivia question was going to be about Coach Knight in the movie Anger Management with Adam Sandler, his one scene. But during your conversation, I thought, no, I'm going in a different direction. And I asked the question, not realizing that you were in the movie.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Didn't get a credit, but he asked me to do it. We went to Tipton High School, or Frankfurt High School. By the way, do you know, a trivia question for you guys.
Yeah.
What is the nickname of the Frankfurt High School basketball team?
The Knights?
Knights, yeah.
Hot dogs.
The hot dogs.
Frankfurt hot dogs.
I was going to say the
Come
wieners.
the Frankfurt hot dogs. That's who they are. Yeah. Look it up. Frankfurt, Indiana.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, we were at their gym. It was a great time. So lots of great stories about Indiana basketball with Coach here. And all the guys have their own share. But, being on the cover of Sports Illustrated, unbelievable treat. I still get 5, 6, 7, 8 a year in the mail with a felt tip pen. Please sign this and return in the self-addressed stamped envelope, and I always do. I've seen them on the internet for I think $6 now, so it's not a great moneymaker, but what an honor to be covered by that magazine, and still to this day it's still unbelievable to me. But the great memories of Indiana basketball from the mid '70s will live on, and people come in the restaurant all the time. I remember watching you on TV. I remember listening to you on TV. It's just been a great experience. So that whole Indiana Notre Dame thing worked out the exact way it was. I've seen Digger since then, over the years. He and Coach were good friends. And Digger would always say, you turned out to be pretty good. I should have kept you. I said, no, Digger, you made the right choice. I said, thank you so much. I ended up in Indiana.
John, I just want to ask one story. I had got to be around Coach Knight for about an hour when we were doing some work with the White Sox in spring training. And I was taking pictures of him. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's Bobby Knight. I'm all intimidated. He's a big man. And I was like maybe 5 feet from him. And he turned around and just gave me that. He gave me the look. And I literally melted. He came off to be very nice, but at the time, I literally just melted. I thought, okay, I'm going to put my camera away and walk away. He just had that look about him. It was intimidating.
He sure did. He sure did. And the persona precedes him. And so you kind of know, man, this guy, if you say something wrong as a reporter, he's going to call you out right away. That's the dumbest question I've ever heard. And so it makes you think, what's the right question to ask here without him embarrassing me? And everybody kind of approached him that way. What can I say to him that he's not going to call me back on? As that's really stupid, you know? And that's an advantage to him right from the start, whether it's recruiting or talking to a press guy or whatever it might be. He gained it at a very young age. He was an assistant varsity coach for a year, and then all of a sudden Tate's Locke takes him to Army as an assistant coach, and then Tate leaves and Knight gets the Army job at like 25 or 6. I mean, it's crazy. Nobody gets a job at 25 or 26 now. And then shortly after that, 6, 7 years, he's at Indiana as a coach of a Big Ten program. So just wild stuff. I've heard the story that Wisconsin offered him the job in 1970. Wisconsin was not very good in the 70s, and they offered him the job, and he accepted the job at Wisconsin. And he said, here's one condition. I've got to go back to West Point. I've got to tell my colonels that I'm leaving. I want this word going out, and I'll call you back tomorrow after I've talked to them, and I will take the job. And they said, okay, we'll do it. And who knows how it happened, but word got out that Knight was going to be the Wisconsin coach. And he called them and said, I told you guys I wouldn't do it. I'm not taking the job. Wow. If you don't listen to me when I do this, you know, then how am I going to trust you on other stuff that I need to get done? And he walked away from the Wisconsin job. The next year, he gets the Indiana job. Bill Orwig was the athletic director. Bill Orwig was an official, a Big Ten referee in basketball in the early 60s. And he did Ohio State games, and he saw that team, and he knew Knight from there. And Indiana was not in a good position of $100 handshakes in the locker room, guys driving cars before NIL stuff, you know. And Orwig said, I got to find the cleanest guy in America to coach my team. And he remembered Knight from those Ohio State days, and that's how Knight got the job, because it was the exact opposite of ball that Indiana fans wanted to. You know, Orwig called him in and said, Coach, you got to score more points. You know, we are the Hurricane Hoosiers, and we score 100 points a game. That's what these fans want, because they're upset that we're playing defense now. And he told Orwig, don't you worry about that. We're going to win games, and they can think what they want. I'm going to show you how to win games. And he did, you know. So he even would go to his boss and say, I know what I'm doing. Just don't worry. They'll be fine. They'll come around. And they became the most loyal fans around once Coach started winning.
Oh, he won games, that's for sure. Coach Knight won 3 national championships while at Indiana, 1976, 1981, and 1987. But he often said the best team he ever coached was that 1975 team with 4 All-Big Ten players and the super sub, John Laskowski, off the bench. John, thanks so much for taking some time to be with us today. We thoroughly enjoyed it.
I enjoyed meeting you guys, and thanks so much for making the memories come true for me.
John Laskowski, the guy on cover of SI this week, 50 years ago. He still can't believe it.
Awesome.
Next up,
some golf, a game of Jack or better. And the burning question in 1975 in this article asks if Johnny Miller is better than Jack Nicklaus. And the answer is no.
No.
And this week, Mark, neither were better than an old pro.
Gene Littler, who a lot of people don't know about it, but he's a member of the World Golf Hall of Fame. He was a great golfer. I mean, he started in the mid 50s, you know, and he golfed for a very long time. But what's amazing is, so he wins this Bing Crosby Pro-Am, okay, in 1975 by 4 strokes. In 1954, he won this tournament as an amateur. So 21 years apart, kind of bookends for him right there. Winning as an amateur and then winning as a pro.
That's
And he
awesome.
had 29 PGA wins in his career. So, and I think he finished twice. He finished second at the Masters twice in his career.
The
But a
fact
lot-
is that until Tiger came onto the scene, nobody really took the throne from Jack and played at a
Yeah.
level that high ever. And honestly, as it turns out, not even Tiger in the end. Jack, in my opinion, is still the best to ever play the game. You agree with that, Billy?
Oh, very much, very much. Nicklaus just, I mean, you just look at the comparison, at least with Johnny Miller. From 73 to 76, Miller won 2 majors and 14 tournaments. That's pretty impressive. But after that major, Miller won no majors and 7 tournaments. And then you go to Nicklaus and you go in 1976, he won the Tournament Players Championship. But after that, he won 8 tournaments plus 4 majors. Nicklaus just stands out. It's going to be a long time, especially now, for anyone to even equal that record that Nicklaus has.
I never saw Arnold Palmer play in his prime, and even Nicklaus to that extent prime to really appreciate it or whatever. I mean, they could be like the Willie Mays and Hank Aaron, golf, basically.
Yeah.
2 great, players, athletes, whatever you want to call them, that's succeeding at their sport.
It always makes me wonder, though, guys like Miller, does putting that pressure on a guy like that maybe hurt your game a little bit? All of a sudden they're saying, you may be better than Jack Nicklaus. I wonder because you never know what pressure someone feels internally.
Absolutely. And, so there was, not to downplay Johnny Miller, but like Johnny Miller came up and was like, oh, he's going to be the next Jack. And Jack was like, nope, I'm still here. And then Tom Watson kind of came and nope, he was great, but not quite to that level. And then Tom Kite, I mean, all these people kept coming at Jack, but Jack was in a league of his own.
Right. Now, going back to the guy who won this tournament, Littler, he actually, stepped away from the tour for a short time in 72. He had melanoma on his upper left arm and had surgery, but then came back and played. And I think he said in 1975, there were only 8 players in the history of golf that earned over $1 million in sanctioned, play. And the 8 were Nicklaus, Palmer, Billy Casper, Lee Trevino, Bruce Crampton, Tom Weiskopf, Gary Player, and Gene Littler.
Wow. That's a pretty good list.
It is.
Yeah. TV Radio by William Leggett, bringing the outdoors in. A couple of weeks ago, we spoke at length about Curt Gowdy, the legendary Red Sox broadcaster, who went on to do great things covering the NFL and the World Series for NBC and ABC Sports, but it was the American Sportsman that he did that is killing it in the ratings. Get this, nearly 7 million homes tune in each week, easily beating CBS's NBA telecast, that's 5.1 million, and NBC's NHL games, 3.1 million. So not sure how that show would do now with 1,000 different stations.
Yeah.
But Curt Gowdy, born in Wyoming, the cowboy, this was really his thing. He loved to do the outdoor sports, the fishing, hunting, that kind of stuff.
Did you guys watch those type shows when you were kids?
I did not.
Yeah, neither did I.
I watched the Jacques Cousteau ones. Where he
I watched a few of them.
I love those. What is it? The something of Omaha?
Yeah. Mutual
of Omaha. I used to watch those.
Wild Kingdom. It was
Wild Kingdom. I watched that.
With Marlon Perkins.
That's right. And Jim would always be in like some lion.
Right. Exactly.
Jim's going to go talk to the Bengal Tigers. And I'm thinking,
right. He's wrestling the anaconda now while I sit back here very comfortable. I
feel like those shows were like always on, like on Sundays, like after the football games.
Yep.
And I was always like, I want to watch these shows, but really what I want is more football to be on, but there isn't any more football. So I'll just keep this on for a little while, but
yeah, it's like filler programming, but a lot of people liked it. And back then, the NBA and the NHL just didn't have the audiences, especially the NBA, that it does now. Yep. So, a Sunday afternoon game of the week, for the NBA, is not going to generate the ratings in the mid 70s that it would say today, I guess.
The American Sportsman, began its current run with a program on wolves stalking caribou in the Canadian Northwest. And this year, has a show with Bing Crosby and
Mm.
Phil Harris hunting Canadian geese. Coming up, Dick Butkus going for Pacific sailfish, and actress Margot Kidder in a beautifully photographed essay on hang gliding. So that was what the whole premise of the show was. They'd find some sort of outdoor event or sport and pair it with another athlete or celebrity, and they would, there'd be Kurt Gowdy and Ted Williams fishing, or Dick Butkus going hunting with someone. So that was the whole idea behind the show. And I think the other thing is back then, 50, 60 years ago, we weren't as trained to see these guys on. So seeing Ted Williams on TV had to be like, oh my God, that's Ted Williams. We don't act that way anymore. But that was really kind of like eye-opening in the 60s.
Right.
Yeah.
I would have been more fascinating if they were hunting werewolves as opposed to regular wolves, or
yes.
That does help. That would bring up, yes.
True.
I think the ratings would be sky high on that.
They would. They would.
Until after the 9th episode, when they were like, still haven't seen one.
Or cameraman got his face ripped off by one.
We spoke at length about the Indiana Hoosiers basketball team already, but what else is going on in college hoops, guys? A little tiny women's basketball team in I don't even know where it was. It was
in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, national champions. Tell us about it.
It's Immaculata, I guess is how you pronounce it. I had no idea that this was such a powerhouse in women's sport in the beginning. They played in 6 straight. I guess it was the AIAW basketball tournament at the time, before it was like NCAA, and they were in 6 straight Final Fours from 72 to 77, 5 straight finals from 72 to 76, and won 3 straight championships from 72 to 74. I mean, that's insane. That's just,
But also the thing is, they did this without scholarships or a physical education major, because they couldn't attract. That didn't attract young girls that wanted to play basketball when you can't get a scholarship. So the fact that they won 3 straight national championships, they were also the first team to ever be broadcast live. The women's intercollegiate basketball game, the finals against Maryland, was the first broadcast live for women's basketball on a television network.
Yep.
And then I thought there was something after their 3rd title, as a reward for the season, they finally have regulation leather instead of rubber basketballs from which to practice.
Oh God.
I mean, for the love of God, thought that you can't even get real basketballs there. Shows you how good they were.
Yeah, I don't, now it's more like, UConn and Notre Dame and Tennessee,
Stanford. Yeah.
I'm not hearing little Immaculata. I don't think they're still at that level, but they sure were a powerhouse half a century ago.
They still celebrated that college. They still celebrate it every year or every 10 years.
Good for
the
them.
game that the SI is referring to, the January 26th game, with that first nationally televised game.
Yeah.
They facing Maryland at Cole Fieldhouse, and they win the game 80-48. But what was noted about the game, it had more turnovers in the game. Ready for this? There were 70 turnovers in the game than scoring, 56 field goals, 16 free throws.
Oh my gosh.
Sounds like a real fun game there.
They were also the first college women's program to ever play at Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
And
had play some.
I guess there was a movie. It was adapted into a movie called The Mighty Max, which I'd never heard of.
I've seen that like 10 times.
Yeah. So, and their head coach Kathy Rush is inducted into the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame.
Her name sounded familiar when I saw it. Yeah.
Let's move on. A swimmer of dire straits, a former girlfriend of Mark Hoffman's, Lynn Cox.
Yep.
No, I can't remember. Somehow, I think Lynn, I don't know how it was. My brother-in-law was working in the Museum of Natural History. I don't know how she got there, but somehow there's a connection. And either I was going to be set up to do an interview for a feature or an interview for a date. I don't know. I can't remember. It was so long ago.
Say all of them, man.
Yeah, in the 80s. But yeah, but when I saw that name, Lynn Cox, I right away said, "Oh my God, I remember that name."
Do you still have her number?
I probably do that old phone book of
Yes,
mine.
you
It's
keep
like,
everything, man.
no, that burned in the fire.
I was
Sorry.
going to say, I don't think
sorry.
you did. If that's the one thing you have,
Yeah.
have a
Sorry.
real get Lynn's number.
Yeah, let me go run in the house and get that phone
I can
book
call
from
Lynn now.
from 1985. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to her over the phone too, maybe trying to set up this feature. But yeah,
Sprouting of an old seed, 33-year-old Marty Reason won a thrilling 5-set match in the finals of the U.S. Indoor Tournament over a young 20-year-old nobody had heard of, but once they heard the name, they wouldn't forget it. Vitas Gerulaitis.
yep.
Ken Rosewall
Here.
has been mentoring the youngster who just dropped out of Columbia, where he was enrolled on an academic scholarship. One of the great names of tennis from the 70s and 80s. He would die in 94 at the age of 40 from carbon monoxide poisoning, but he was like just a tier below the greats of that time, the Connors, the McEnroes. He was always like getting to the semifinals and stuff, but quite a character. And like I said, a name you would hear once and never forget.
I told the story on this podcast before. The first thing I ever logged in sports was a tennis match between Vitas Gerulaitis and Guillermo Vilas.
Vilas.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, Vilas. I went 5 sets. I went forever, ever.
He is famous for one of the all-time great quotes in sports. After losing to Jimmy Connors 16 straight times, Gerulaitis got the better of Jimmy in a match in January of 1980 and said, quote, "Let that be a lesson to you all. Nobody beats Vitas Gerulaitis 17 times in a row." You gotta love that kind of a sense of humor. So, all right, we're getting towards the end here. For the record, Mark, go first.
Well, George Ireland is retiring as head coach of Loyola Marymount.
No.
Yes, he's going to stay on as AD, but I mean, George, had quite the career. I mean, he led Loyola Marymount to the NCAA championship in 1963 when they defeated Cincinnati in overtime. That was the last championship that wasn't won by UCLA for 10 times in that 12, when they had 10 championships in that 12-year run. That was the last non-UCLA title team. And the following year, UCLA started its run.
Wow.
But yeah, he had an incredible job there. He did. Besides that, his teams were always good. They were high scoring. That 63 team that won the title, they averaged almost 94 points a game. They defeated Tennessee Tech in the first round of the NCAA tournament that year, 111-42, which I think is still a record. That's what, 69 points? My math.
They weren't that far away.
And who will ever forget that LMU team of 90?
Yeah.
That also was putting up like 130 points a game back then with after the death of Hank Gathers with Bo Kimball and that great team, Paul Westphal, the coach. Oh, what a run they had.
Right. And I think in 2013, on the 50th anniversary, they were honored at the White House by President Obama at the time.
Good for them. That's great. Hey, Billy, the Oilers have replaced Sid Gilman with a new head coach.
Yep, they hired old Bum Phillips, who had actually a nice 6-year run in Houston. Loved Bum Phillips, but I think I loved him more. I loved his quotes. Here's a couple of them here.
Yeah.
Said, there's two kinds of coaches, them that's fired and them that's going to be fired. And Bum Phillips had such a perfect way of saying these quotes. And then he has another one. He said, "You don't know a ladder has splinters until you slide down it." I just loved Bum. He's a good coach too.
He had the cowboy hat and the southern drawl. And
he was a true cowboy.
He really was. Yeah. Bum Phillips, what a character. Faces in the crowd. You go first, Bill.
Okay, let me give you Brian Cohen. He's an 11-year-old Ohio soccer player who scored 52 goals in 12 games. But it didn't stop there. He went on to play in 2 professional soccer leagues where he scored 65 goals in 112 games. So he really made some of himself in the world of soccer.
Yeah. Wow. 11-year-old and killing it in soccer. Kind of like you, Billy.
Oh, yes. I scored one. It was against my team.
Mark Mouse.
I got Bill Willoughby, the 6'8" senior forward at Dwight Morrow High in New Jersey. He scored 51 and 54 points in consecutive games, breaking the school's record. He averaged almost 38 points a game, 16.4 rebounds in his first 12 games that season. And then Bill ended up playing for a while in the NBA. He played from 75 to 84. He was in the NBA, but he skipped college. So he went straight from high school to the NBA, and he was drafted by the Atlanta Hawks. And then he played for the Hawks, the Buffalo Braves, the Cavaliers, the Rockets, the Spurs, and the Nets. But to me, the most remarkable thing about him is not his NBA career, because he only averaged about 6 points a game during his NBA career. But after he played, he ended up finally getting his college degree. He went to Farley Dickinson, and in 2001, at the age of 44, finally got that degree in communications.
Yep. Good for him.
But remember, back in those days, though, going to the NBA from high school was unheard of. Now it's
Moses Malone.
Well, Moses Malone to the ABA. So that's what I thought. I thought that was one of the things that differed between the ABA and the NBA. I didn't know you could go to the NBA. I thought they had a rule, but I guess obviously they didn't.
He was the first pick in the second round of the 75 NBA draft.
Yep.
So he was 18 at the time.
When he got his degree at the age of 44, the NBA fully paid all of his college expenses. And in return, Willoughby is a special advisor to the NBA who now counsels high school players considering forsaking college basketball for the NBA. Because, we talk about your Jermaine O'Neal's, Kevin Garnett's, Kobe Bryant's, and all these kids that make it and succeed, because we don't talk about the ones that don't. And 3 years later, we're like, who's that guy the T-Wolves took? You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because if you don't make it, that whatever bonus you're getting, that doesn't last sometimes as long as they think it will. So good for Willoughby for giving back like that.
A perfect guest for our show sometime.
Absolutely. Would love that. Hey, want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in, and to John Laskowski for being a part of our show 50 years after he was coming off the bench for Coach Knight and the Hoosiers. He could start for us anytime. In fact, love that story about him saying that Coach Knight asked if he wanted to start, and he was like, I kind of like what I'm doing. So thanks to him. Bill, Mark, thanks, guys. Have a great week.
Yeah.
You guys kick butt.
You got it. I'm Scott, and we are, Mark, who are we?
We're past our prime.
There we go. See you, boys.
Oh, wait. We're past our prime.
There you go. Yeah, you said it. You just said it. You go, we're past our prime? Turn.
No, we're past our prime.
Right. That's right.
Sure the hell are.